Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 257. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recording on the morning of Saturday, February the 26th, from the James Strong Studio in western St. Charles County. Dear listeners, I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't sleep. There's a lot of stuff going on in my life and in everybody's life and in the world. And I guess I had enough sleep because I woke up and had a couple cups of coffee, felt fine. And I guess I would say I'm troubled a little bit. No, I will definitely say that I'm troubled a whole lot about Putin's war in the Ukraine. Not so much about that, because that's really not much of a surprise. Vladimir Putin, as I mentioned in a podcast months ago, Vladimir Putin is one of the few people in this world, along with Xi Jinping and the Ayatollahs in Iran, that are truly inherently evil human beings. Not just bad guys, not just bad actors, not just mistaken people, not just fools, inherently evil human beings. Okay. So it's no surprise that he's decided to invade the Ukraine because he's an inherently evil person. What's bothered me is the commentary that I've heard from people that you wouldn't expect to hear commentary from. At least you wouldn't expect to hear this type of commentary from. I'm talking about news sources, commentators, and just average Americans saying, you know what? Yeah, that Putin guy, he's a pretty smart guy. He's pretty good. We probably need to listen to him. We probably need to think twice about what he's saying about the West and the Ukraine. Now, we're all watching this war in the Ukraine. And we all have our opinions of what the U.S. and NATO should do, what they're not doing, what they ought to do. And you know what? Opinions are fine. But please, dear listeners, please, dear listeners, base your opinions on fact. Because if you don't, you will be dismissed as a fool at best, or sway others into a bastardized, harmful mindset at worst. Either result, based on your short-sighted opinion, it's on you. You own it. It will be your brand. And that's how others will see you. Now, this isn't a sporting event. It's not a video game. It's not a television. It's not a movie. It's not a Lifetime drama, okay? Where you running your mouth, that's acceptable. It may be even expected. Our St. Louis Blues hockey team won 5-3 tonight, okay? So you can talk about the goalie controversy. You can talk about, is the coach doing the right thing? Are the right guys playing the right way? That's all fine because it's a sporting event and it doesn't matter. The baseball strike, same thing. It's a sporting event. It doesn't matter. Same thing about your fantasy football league or your video game friends that you play with. It's all fine to run your mouth like that on stuff that doesn't matter. Because nobody dies, nobody gets shot, nobody gets hurt, no one loses their home. And that's what's happening in the Ukraine. Now, facts are gathered from history and reliable journalistic sources. Not Facebook, not QAnon, not Twitter, not the Gateway Pundit, not the Hollywood big mouths, not what the latest music star happens to think. Those are not reliable sources. They're no more reliable than a 12-year-old boy walking down the street, okay? The Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the New York Post, the UK Daily Mail, the UK Guardian, France 24. Those are reliable news sources. Once upon a time, one of my reliable news sources was the South China Morning Post, a Hong Kong publication. But that was purchased by Alibaba, and Jack Ma was imprisoned for about 6 months by the Chinese government. They educated him, and now the South China Daily Post, unfortunately, is just another mouthpiece for the communist Chinese government. but I digress. You know what I'm talking about when I say reliable sources. Reliable history books, by the way, are also good sources because we can learn from history. We should learn more from history, but we certainly can still learn from history. Now, I have heard or read many people, many sources, many ideas out there speaking well of Vladimir Putin. And I'm shocked. They're speaking well of Vladimir Putin. Why, he's so smart, and he's playing Biden like a fiddle. And you know what? It's really the West's fault that the Ukraine was invaded by the Russians anyway. Dear listeners, those of you who hear me on a regular basis, or even a semi-regular basis, understand that I do not suffer well the folly of fools. And if your thoughts run in that direction about Putin, I'm sorry, but you are a fool. Vladimir Putin is inherently evil. So is Xi Jinping. So are the Iranian Ayatollahs. Same. Inherently evil human beings. Now, is he a smart guy? Well, sure he is. I mean, he was a top-notch officer in the KGB. He's run Russia since 2008, mainly because he's killed or imprisoned all of his opposition, and anybody who opposes him politically is either dead or in prison, and nobody else wants to be dead or in prison. So they say, yeah, what the heck, we'll go along. So he's a smart guy, but it doesn't mean we should even consider what he's doing as being the right thing. Hitler was a smart guy. In fact, Hitler reinvented and brought back the economy of Germany, okay? Mussolini was a sharp guy. He made the trains run on time in Italy. They don't run on time in Italy today, but they did under Mussolini. Pontius Pilate, Herod, they were good guys. They kept peace in their area of governance for many, many years. But they're all inherently evil. Nonetheless, dear listeners, do not confuse intelligence with benevolence. Don't do it. Now, the U.S. took a long time to get into World War II. This is kind of going into a history lesson here. The U.S. took a long time to get into World War II. And one of the main reasons was that many, not most, but many politicians in this country didn't want to get in the war because they wanted to stay on the good side of Hitler because they believed he was going to win the war. They sided with the inherently evil. And that included the United States ambassador to Great Britain, Joseph Kennedy Sr. A lot of people said he was a pro-Nazi. He wasn't a pro-Nazi, but he wanted the United States to stay neutral and do absolutely nothing, including that he did not want the United States to impose sanctions on Hitler because his theory was, look, after he rules the world, we want to be on his good side. That's not the way you want to be. You don't want to side with the inherently evil because you think that there's going to be more money in your bank account at the end of the day. And this is coming from a guy who was a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist, by the way. That's me. History has proved those politicians wrong. Those that sided with Hitler, or at least wanted to stay neutral, history proved them wrong. They were on the wrong side of history. Dear listeners, don't you be on the wrong side of history. Now, Hitler in Germany and Putin in Russia, the similarities here are striking in most all ways. And I've learned this through history. And I think most of you learned it through history as well. Maybe you've just forgotten it. So I will remind you. After World War I, Germany was emasculated. They had destroyed the Western world. They had destroyed Europe, I should say, with a war. And by golly, they were going to be made pay. And they just demasculized Germany. And that country was in a big mess. Same thing with Russia. After the breakup of the Soviet Union, they were just decimated. So their economy went to hell. Things, especially for the party members, weren't good. Things weren't good in Russia, and Putin brought them back, just like Hitler brought back Germany. Both were charismatic leaders, promising to restore the past glory of Mother Russia and Mother Deutschland. The Sudetenland, same thing as Crimea, Georgia, and the Ukraine. And what I mean by that is Hitler told Europe, look, go back into history. And the Sudetenland, which included the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia at that time, several other countries, that was historically just part of Germany. And when you broke it up and gave them their independence, you shouldn't have done that. Give us the Sudetenland and we'll just leave you alone. And the world said, fine, you can have it. Because if you have it now, you got to promise not to invade us. Well, you see how that worked out, right? There's lots of differences, okay? But there are a lot of things that are not the same. The Sudetenland was just given away. No shot was fired. The Ukraine, not so much. The West has basically, in a way, let Putin take the Ukraine, mainly because they didn't send troops in. Now the West has imposed sanctions, and in my humble opinion, that's the way to fight a war nowadays. But the Ukrainian people are fighting. People in the Sudetenland did not. Here are the differences. When Hitler started World War II, he was in his prime. Vladimir Putin is 70 years old. He's no longer that man who rides around on a horse without a shirt saying, look at me, I'm a man. He's a puffy, fat, 70-year-old man with the clock ticking on his timesheet. He needs to do something now, or he's not going to get it done. Now, he's killed or imprisoned his opposition, but the new ones are rising, like these oligarchs. Russia was ran by oligarchs after the breakup of the Soviet Union. Putin obtained power in the Soviet Union by embracing the oligarchs, and he gave them pieces of the old communist economy. You get the trains, you get the factories, you get the smelter factories, you get the mines, okay? And turn these guys into billionaires overnight. After he gave them the power, he then killed the ones who were not loyal to him and gave their share to somebody else. That's how the oligarchs work in the Soviet Union. In Russia. But there's new ones out there who have made their money by working with the West, not just by inheriting, by default, the old communist factories. And these guys are being sanctioned, and these guys do not like it, not one bit. Now, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden have all tried to work with Putin, and he lied to them all. Each and every one, including Donald Trump. They all tried to be his buddy. They all tried to embrace him. They all wanted to try and bring Russia into the West. But he just lied to them, every one of them. It was his MO, because Vladimir Putin is inherently evil. Different politicians, different methods, different results. And I'll tell you why. Here's why this is not going to turn out well. First of all, think back as to in a case where somebody who is inherently evil, where it's really worked out well for the world. I can't think of any case. Short term, yes. Long term, never. Here's the biggest difference in the Russia of the old Soviet era and the Russia of today. The old generations of Russians are gone. They will not live. The old generations of Russians said, okay, you know what? we will live on vodka and beets and live in an unheated house